when you're only doing a few sets per muscle group per week, taking those sets to the point where you are for sure extremely close to failure is extremely important, because you only have a few chances to actually meaningfully stimulate muscle growth.
Hey folks, Dr. Mike here for RP Strength, and today we have Dr. Pack. He is an expert in sports science and exercise science and in getting you jacked. And today, welcome Pack.
Hello.
He's gonna talk some smack.
Hey.
Ooh. But on the turntables, he's gonna attack. I'm done, I swear. He was a disc jockey back in the early 80s. We're gonna talk about low volume training because it's been all the rage. It turns out you can get pretty jacked without low volume training, but some people seem to think they can't do it or have problems doing it. And you're gonna tell me that they're not approaching it correctly, and you're gonna tell me how to do it.
Yeah, for sure.
Fill us in.
So just some background. PhD in the minimum dose of for strength, essentially what's the least you can do to get stronger. And through that avenue, I essentially dabble in a lot of things low volume, and a big proponent of, hey, you can still make gains and really good gains by not doing as much. However, when it comes to low volume training and the promotion of low volume training in the current days, we often hear a lot of people quoting what's his name? Mike Menzer. We see low volume training being all the hype, claims around doing too much, can insert random mechanism that is not actually supported by a ton of evidence. And in general, we see a lot of hype around low volume training for potentially maximizing gains. First things first, as it stands, and there's more evidence coming out in the next few months. Maybe that evidence will be out by the time the video is out, essentially further establishing the idea that there's a dose-response relationship between training volume and hypertrophy. Turns out, the more you do, the more you get, up to an extent. Without that meaning you cannot make amazing gains just by doing a little. However, some common mistakes when people approach low volume training are, number one, doing way too little volume.
What is that?
So doing as low as like 2 to 4 sets per muscle group per week and I'll set the context, when the individuals that follow these routines want to get pretty jacked and in a relatively not short period of time, but they don't want to spend years and years and years. So the idea that low volume training or lower volume training can be great, totally good. But if you're somebody watching Renaissance Periodization and you want to be jacked and you want to grow all the muscles on your body, and some muscles respond less to low volume training than others, going for the absolute lowest possible training volume that you can just because you saw it on a Mike Menzer reel and because some ultra jacked freak told you that, hey, all I do is 3 sets for my biceps per week, or even 1 set to all failure brother Dorian Yates. That just doesn't make sense. That's a number one mistake. Doing 10 sets, 10 direct sets, so we're not even gonna count fractional sets, per muscle group per week, in my opinion, that's still pretty low volume as far as making things work goes, and especially with more data coming out on time-efficient strategies like supersets, where we recently saw in trained individuals, agonist-antagonist supersets, no differences in growth over 8 weeks.
But the supersets save time.
They saved 56% of time.
So you end up being able to smash more volume in if you just take slightly less breaks and still benefit from not having to do ultra low volume.
Yes.
So ultra low volume, 2 to 4 sets per muscle per week, maybe is a little low for most people. What about 4 to 8 sets per muscle per week? Is that reliably going to grow most people? But obviously not as fast as more could.
Yeah, in terms of direct sets, so like the reason I'm saying direct sets is we should also, like for your biceps, we'd count a set of lat pull downs as, let's say, half a set. So if you're looking at 4 to 8 sets, I'd say 6 to 8. I think that's much safer of direct sets, a much safer bet to make if you want to start to experiment with low volume training and muscle growth specifically.
But still want to get really jacked.
Yes.
Got it.
Ideally, I'd be somewhere close to 10 direct sets per muscle group per week, which in my opinion is relatively low volume.
Relatively low volume, but still meat and potatoes enough to like do something.
Yes, for sure. The number two mistake I often see when people try the low volume routines and go even lower than we just said is not having enough intensity of effort. So when you're only doing a few sets per muscle group per week, taking those sets to the point where you are for sure extremely close to failure is extremely important, because you only have a few chances to actually meaningfully stimulate muscle growth. And if you are just feeling the burn and feeling like you're close to failure, but you're not really there, that can make a huge difference in that context.
Higher volume programs, you can kind of make up for it just by doing more sets. But for lower volume programs, if you don't go pretty hard within the sets you're doing, you're going to see some maybe not as impressive gains is what you're saying.
Yes. And although the current literature shows that in lab settings, most people are pretty good at gauging proximity to failure, as a coach, and obviously here, this is where being evidence-based comes in place. Anecdotally, having worked with hundreds of individuals of all levels, you often see people still leaving reps in reserve. And in the context of low volume training, a set at RP 7 or like RIR 3, where you have 3 reps in reserve, versus a set where you have 1 rep in reserve, again, in the context of maximize or making like a ton of gains, can make a big difference. So you have to take those sets there. It doesn't matter if it's legs, if it's arms, like you gotta train very, very hard. Those sets are not gonna be fun sets.
Yeah, that makes sense. Luckily, the high intensity training Mike Mentzer people, they seem to say like they pay really good lip service to that at the very least, and they really do believe it. So that they do have. Mm-hmm. What else you got?
So the other thing is exercise selection. If you are only doing a handful of sets or slightly more than that, and in a previous Renaissance periodization RP strength video, we went over the squat and why that is indeed the barbell squat, not king of exercises. If, let's say, for your quads, you're only doing squats or leg presses or hack squats, and you're not adding an exercise like the leg extensions in to fully target all the quad musculature, then again, you're leaving gains on the table. Same goes with other muscle groups. If all you're doing is 8 sets of lat pull downs per week, and you're not doing some form of row, you're again leaving gains on the table.
I get this question really often. Mm-hmm. Can I just get a big back by rowing? Or can I just get a big back by pull downs or pull ups? And a part of me at the end I give a good technical answer, but a part of me sarcastically, just for fun, just for the jokes, he's like, you lazy I should stop swearing too much on this channel. You know what I mean?
Yes.
What are you talking about? Go to the gym. You can look at the muscles and how they're designed. You're not going to be getting full back hypertrophy from just rows or pull downs. You got to do some kind of horizontal, some kind of vertical, and some kind of leg extension, some kind of press for the quads, so on and so forth. It's not that much stuff.
It's not.
And I think there's another group of people who seem to pride themselves in the simplicity of their program. What is it? Make an explanation as simple as you can, but no simpler. I think some people go into that no simpler thing where they're like real proud of it. Like, yeah, man, only squats for these legs. Like, you see a guy with a decent chest, like just push-ups. Like, you don't do any incline presses? Like, nope, just push-ups. Like, wow, you have a mediocre chest just doing push-ups. Imagine how okay it could be if you did incline presses too. So a lot of people, have you found that to be the case? They kind of stick to their like, well, I don't want to do like 50 different movements. I just want one. And it's like, all right.
Yeah, it's a case where people say something, they hear it, they repeat it to other people that don't really have a horse in the race. People agree, and then they establish that as common wisdom. So they say, I don't want to do a bunch of shit at the gym. And it's like, bro, is 2 exercises really that much? Like, you've worked with plenty of people. I've worked with busy people, the people that don't have time. It's not that deep to do an extra exercise or even 2. Yeah. Especially if you're only doing a handful of sets per muscle group per week. Just spend the extra minute.
For sure.
You know?
For sure. What else we got?
So now we're getting a bit more meta. And the next mistake is the expectations that people have when it comes to low volume training. And that's a big mistake in my opinion. So it's like you're accepting that you're doing something suboptimal but you're going into it expecting optimal results based off, I don't know, some observation, survivorship bias as well. You only hear the freaks that made it with low volume. You don't see the 100 non-responders that did 8 sets per week and didn't see that many gains. But going into low volume training and be like, okay, we're about to blow up is likely going to leave you disappointed, might lead to a bit of a nocebo effect. And then that can just result in a vicious, in a bad cycle of emotions and gains missed.
Yeah, that definitely is a thing that happens. Let's see if we can trace the mean logic. I already like to train with low volume. And then I see some Menser TikToks. Now I'm really bought in. And then I see some kind of video by Menno Henselmans about some study, and it's like, actually more volume leads to more gains. And like, it upsets you. You're like, man, stupid fucking science. But then you see a study. You don't see the study. You see 30 seconds of a 1 minute full TikTok reel by you that shows us that you can make some gains with low volumes, much more than we expected. And then through some kind of mystery diffusion, some gains disappears. Science officially said you can make gains with low volume. Menser said it was great gains. So I'm taking the great from Menser and the permission to have gains from science. I've divided Menno entirely out of the equation by this point. So now I'm back to expecting that low volumes are going to give me great gains. Science said so.
Yep.
There was one of the funniest comments, there's many different versions of this, is a new study comes out saying high volumes are good for muscle growth, or a new one says low volumes can also work. And there's at least one person in any media who has a comment. It's like, man, this science shit is all wacky. Man, one day they'll tell you have to train with high volumes. The next day you have to train with low volumes. It's like, nobody said have to. They didn't even say they were the same. You just have a very small amount of thoughts that can go through the pinhole of light that is your brain. And you got to slow them down one at a time.
Yep.
Now, all jokes aside, that is a thing that people get into the mix. And so what you're saying is, for some people, low volume can be better than high volume for their gains. For many people, low volume and high volume is relatively equivalent. For most people, high volume is better, but almost everyone can get some kind of gains with low volume. But notice the last two things I said. For most people, high volume is better, and those same people can still get some gains from low volume. That's more or less correct?
Yeah, more or less.
So we don't want to like flip those two on each other, because then we get just to pure nonsense. Oh, well, for most people, high volume doesn't work. And for almost everyone, low volume is the best. It's the opposite of that. It doesn't mean low volume is bad. It just means minimalist routines lead to, drumroll, minimalist results. That's how it works.
Yes. And it's important to also understand that what meaningful, how you define meaningful, is important in this discussion. So yes, your average, whatever, insert fancy job here, person who wants to feel strong, have above average person. Keep in mind, people out in the real world are not jacked monsters. Above average muscularity means at the pool party, your friend looks at you and says, oh, you look better, huh?
Yeah. Or you're like out at a camping site and you're pumping the well thing at camping sites with your daughter and she's 3, and you had to take your shirt off because things are getting wet. And all of a sudden people are like, that guy looks great for 44.
Yeah, exactly.
That. Not like, oh, when is he stepping on stage? Like, there's a different level of input that's going to happen to get you to do that. So for the guy that's looking great for 44 years old, low volume, amazing. But expect to look like a guy who looked great for 44.
Yes.
Not people come up to you trying to get autographs in the middle of the street. Not you show up to the Mr. Olympia and shock the crowd like you tend to do every couple of years. You come in and just,
look at this guy, throw stuff at him. He looks disgusting.
Throwing Mr. Olympia trophies at you. If you even paid attention, you would know that. Look at that. See? And he does the fucking
ADHD.
Oh my God.
But it's important to also remind people that as far as the science goes, and more science is coming out, I'm not able to say what exactly.
Oh shit.
But
mystery preview science.
The totality of current evidence does not support that less is more. It supports that less can be enough, and even somewhat change the percentage of gains you can make with less. So that has gone down as more studies have come out. We've talked about some of the super high volume studies. And as far as high volume goes, and take it from the low volume guy, we haven't found that ceiling yet. We haven't found the inverted U relationship, at least in the span of 12 to 16 weeks. So if somebody tells you that the science supports the idea that low is more, be a bit skeptical. And to tie it all in, common issue with people is that there are a lot of folks out there that consume this information that are not blessed genetically. And in those cases, if you want to go for the impressive physique, for the I am jacked among jacked people physique.
Oh, even jacked among non-jacked people is pretty impressive.
Yeah, but I'm saying
just jacked at all.
Yeah, for our standards of jackedness.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you right now, if you don't have great genetics, you're just never going to get to our standards of jackedness. But I didn't mean to cut you off.
Fair enough. But your best bet at getting as close as possible is not going to be low volume.
No, almost never.
Yes.
And that's been based on a couple of other older studies. And that's basically like, if you are an easy gainer, much more volume may not help you much more. If you're a hard gainer, there are two great hypotheses from back in the day. One was, if you're a hard gainer, recovery is a problem for you. Don't train anymore. You need just more sleep and more food. The other hypothesis was, you need to train more. That one won. So for most people who are hard gainers, on 10 sets a week, 20 sets a week is going to be better. Very few of them, hard gainers on 10 sets, will get better gains on 5 sets a week.
Yes, for sure. And that's something that needs to be hammered down. That if you've done it for a year and you're eating well and you're sleeping relatively well, because when we look at sleep and the relationship with gains, look, as long as you're not a shift worker who sleeps 3 hours a day, it's likely that you're okay sleep-wise. If you're not seeing that things are progressing and you're like, no, 10 sets per week per muscle group, I'm not going higher because one crazy guy on YouTube said that we're getting paid by big volume or whatever, you're doing a disservice to your gains. Going higher is likely, again, maybe you're that one person with the worst genetics ever and nothing will ever work, but you're likely going to see much better gains from just doing more. So accept that reality. If you're a low volume fan, at some point, it may be that you need to make the switch. If you want more gains, if you just want to maintain and be more or less the same, cool, stay low.
Stay low is good life advice. You got anything else for us? Is that about it?
That's about it.
Folks, Dr. Pack, always a great installment on this channel. Go do more volume if you want to get jacked. Come back as more jacked next week. We'll see more videos. We'll see more of us. We'll see more of everything. Love you, mean it? Nope, sorry, different person. See you guys next time.
And Ronnie Coleman would have had bigger legs if he did squats deeper. Co-signed.
Damn.
Come at me.